and liberalism are so linked together, we need to go back in time to before either of them were invented. In the days before capitalism, strange as it might seem now, a lot of land wasn't owned by anybody. It was what they called common land. The family was the main unit of society, so you and your peasant family might farm the common land in order to survive. If you were a very wealthy family, maybe even a royal family, maybe you wouldn't need to farm the common land because you've got a lot of money already that either you or an ancestor stole, probably in a war, from somebody else. Then this new thing starts happening called enclosure, where rich people start fencing off the common land and saying that they own it. Nowadays we might call that stealing, but then I suppose nobody owned the land, so maybe we can't call it that. But regardless, you and your peasant family in your village go down to the common moor one morning and find that there's men with swords there now saying that you can't use it anymore, so you've lost the only means you have for feeding yourself. Great. So now, you can't work for yourself as much anymore. You have to work for somebody else in order to survive, working on their land, fighting in their armies, or, when the Industrial Revolution eventually happens, paid for by all that slavery and colonialism we're about to be doing, you'll be able to get a job in a factory. As a result, society becomes more atomized, and the individual labourer who must go to where the work is and work for somebody else becomes the unit of society. And hey, that's the transition from feudalism to capitalism. Now we have free market, we have the investment profit wages relationship, we have individual labourers who have to work for somebody else in order to survive, and all that other good stuff we talked about. All of this, by the way, is a very quick, simplified, and Eurocentric story. If you'd like to know more about the invention of capitalism, there are recommended readings in the description, but you get the rough picture. This transition between feudalism and capitalism was hugely sped up by the English Civil War. Parliament, which was made up of rich white dudes that very few people actually voted for, got upset because Charles I was running the country on his own and starting to look like a bit of a tyrant, at least from where they were sitting. Eventually, the tension broke out into an incredibly bloody and fascinating war with Parliament's forces, led by Oliver Cromwell, fighting the king. The war ends in 1649 with Charles I having his head cut off and Parliament winning. And oh my god, the king is dead! All kinds of new ideas about how to organise a society start getting thrown out there into the public space, because a lot of people suddenly get the idea that the king's dead, anything goes, we can build whatever kind of society we want. Some people even start saying, hey, why don't we have religious freedom so that we don't have so much war all the time? Why don't we bring back the common land so that nobody has to be poor? And actually, why don't we give everyone a say in government this time around? One group, called the Diggers, even invent a form of anarchist socialism hundreds of years before Marx is even born.
Is the earth made to preserve a few covetous and proud men to live at ease, to bag and barn up the treasures of the earth from others, that these should beg and starve in a fruitful land? Divide England into three parts. Scarce one part is manured, so that here is land enough to maintain all her children. Yet many starve for want or live under a heavy burden all their lives. And this misery the poor have brought upon themselves through lifting up particular interests by their labours. The earth, sirs, was made to be a common treasury for all.
And a lot of these new hopeful radicals fight in Cromwell's army, thinking that once the king is gone, they'll get the chance to build a better society. But when Charles is out of the way, Cromwell says, hey, how about instead of all that freedom stuff, you! He turns around and executes most of the people who really wanted serious change and establishes his own government of rich white dudes who want to be filthy rich white dudes, also lets do slavery a lot more and commit atrocities in Northern Ireland. Suddenly, the rich white landowners in Parliament are in charge of everything, and there's nobody standing in their way stopping them from stepping up slavery, stepping up colonialism, stepping up capitalism, and generally trying to make as much money as possible. Even when Charles's son, Charles, eventually becomes king again, Parliament keeps all their new powers, and capitalism is well and truly let off the leash. Part 3. The world's longest-running marketing campaign. So there's this contradiction in 17th century Britain between lots of people suddenly getting great new ideas about freedom and the desires of rich white landowners to absolutely stop that freedom from happening because it means they won't be rich anymore. And in 1690, the philosopher John Locke writes a book that embodies this contradiction. And he says, hey, do you know what would be a great idea? if governments could only be established with the consent of the people. Terms and conditions apply, often not available to slaves, women, indigenous Americans, or anybody who doesn't own property. Side effects include slavery, genocide, colonialism, and imperialism. And hey, look at that! Individualism plus an emphasis on freedom, but with blatant exceptions when it's profitable. Liberalism is born. And a bunch of slave owners decide to take John Locke's ideas and pretty much build a whole new country out of them, called the United States of America. Because of the period of history at which it emerged, liberalism basically takes capitalism as a given. Remember in episode 1 I said that ideologies exist in order to justify violence? Well, a lot of the violence that liberalism legitimizes is the violence that keeps capitalism going. So, in the USA, the Founding Fathers made exceptions to their rules of liberty for slaves, because slavery kept their economy turning. John Stuart Mill made exceptions to the rules of liberty for colonialism, when colonialism was keeping the British Empire's economy turning. Nowadays, my government makes exceptions to the rules for the human rights of immigrants, whose labour keeps our economy turning. From the very beginning, liberalism was designed to reconcile this vision of a better, freer world with the fact that the English Revolution essentially failed to bring that world about, and instead just gave power to rich people so that they could use capitalism to get even richer, with all the violence that that entails. Incidentally, Cromwell's statue is still outside Parliament. We're moving now towards the modern age, and in episode 3 we're going to be talking about liberalism and capitalism's latest incarnation, neoliberalism. In this episode, we've learned about the histories of liberalism and capitalism and how they go together. If you liked today's lesson, I have a tip jar at paypal.me/philosophytube. Think of it like me putting a hat round at the end of the lecture. Or patreon.com/philosophytube is where you could make a monthly donation to help me keep making videos like this one. And don't forget to subscribe.